Okay, guys, good evening. Hello, I'd like to start via Entube Center, and we're going to talk about time lapse here. And time lapse has been, for a long time, actually part of many film sequences of many movies. We all know the sunrise or sunset sequences. There's a certain way to do that, and we're going through all the different ways. But first of all, the basic question at all. What is time lapse? How do we define what is a time lapse? How would you explain to your best friend what a time lapse is? So basically, the simplest thing is if we take a sequence of images and we play it back, and then we speed up the real world in a different way, in a way we couldn't see it in real time with our own eyes. So basically, what we do is we take certain images with a gap, like every 5 seconds or every 10 seconds, and then we stitch it together. And I'm going to talk about today how we're going to do that and what cameras we use for and so on. So let's get right into it. There's different types of cameras. I have some with me. Let's start with the small ones. There's a little GoPro camera. It's a simple GoPro Hero 3, Hero 4, even the GoPro 2. We got an old GoPro 2 here. All these cameras allow actually to set time-lapse modes, which is nothing else than you tell the camera, take a picture every X amount of seconds, and you can set it up. GoPros are limited to certain settings. For example, in the Hero 3, it starts with half a second interval, then 1 second, 2, 3, 5, 10, 30, or 60 seconds. And this is basically the settings you have. This is as for the GoPros. We have prepared, or I have prepared some images. So when you use a GoPro, for example, for time lapse, there's certain possibilities to mount them. For example, you've got the GoPro stand here. You can mount it on some surfaces. You can mount it in a car. For example, that's a really nice thing to do. Take your GoPro, mount it on a car. There's also the options of buying more fancy, like, suction mounts, some stuff like that. It easily sticks on your windscreen, and make sure when you stick it outside, you don't turn the windscreen wipers on. But it doesn't rain that often in Qatar, so basically okay, I guess. But this is also some mounts. You can mount it outside the car, or you just mount it inside the car somewhere and set it to time-lapse mode. Take a picture every 5 seconds, and you end up with hundreds of pictures at the end of the day. And within this hour, I'll also show you practically what are we going to do with all these pictures and how we're going to end up with a final movie sequence with all these images. Besides the GoPros, of course, everybody has a smartphone, so we can use just our simple iPhones, Samsungs, Sonys, whatever you guys have out there. So you can use any of these phones. There's a lot of apps out there. One app is called Miniatures, which is really neat app. Basically, you tell the app, take a picture every amount of seconds, and then you place your phone in a position where it fits, and then it does take the pictures, and at the end of this cycle, you press stop, and it automatically creates a video for you, which is basically the simplest way of doing that with your iPhone. There's certain pros and cons that comes with a limitation with the iPhone. More or less, HD video has 1920 by 1080 pixels, which is compared to a photo camera only 2 megapixels. That means that quality is limited to HD video, and what you see in this image is, at the end of the day, what you get. And we'll come to this when we have the advantages of like DSLR cameras, digital single lens reflex cameras, like my good old Canon 7D here, this one. What we see here, there is a proper optical lens on it. This is a Tokina lens, 11-16 millimeters, so it's a very, very wide angle lens, and it gives me the opportunity to really see a lot, get a very wide shot, so get literally everything into the frame. The big advantage of these cameras compared to the GoPros or the iPhones is basically that these cameras shoot at 80 megapixels, 20, 22 megapixels. And if you remember what I just said, HD video quality pixels. So when I take a photo here with 20 megapixels, I have 10 times the resolution of what iPhone or HD video is worth. So I can crop in this image, I can zoom in until I reach HD size, which gives me a lot of opportunities in post-production, literally moving around my still image and give the impression of having a pan or having a tilt, moving up and down. And how are we going to do that? I'll show you in a bit. You guys, some of you, you're following me, you see the 360 images I do? You know, the ones where you have all the earth out there and everything. So this is the Theta. This is like a 360 device, two cameras, one in the front and one in the back. And you take a 360 image like that, and it immediately loads to your iPhone application, and you can post it. But also these devices, they can do time lapse. So you got a 360 spherical image time lapse with this little device. Very limited in quality, of course, and the minimum interval for these devices is 5 seconds only. But at the end of the day, it's working. So we have a nice overview now over the different cameras, but what do I actually really need if I do a time lapse and I want to do a proper time lapse? The most essential thing is actually a good tripod. Something like that, stable, heavy, steady tripod. You don't want to put your tripod somewhere and then car passes by, gives a little hint, and book a steady tripod. And to make sure when your camera is mounted, everything's tight and neat and everything is holding so that your camera doesn't fall off, doesn't shake. Even if you position the head in the right direction, make sure all screws are tight and everything's good. At the end of the day, without a good tripod, time-lapse is not really working because you need to capture an amount of images at the same position all the time. So, for example, there's many tripods out there, and this is just randomly. It's nothing about the. This tripod, which has a normal head, would do it. It could do the job. It's not one of the best because it's more light. It's more good for traveling. It's more mobile. So it's not a heavy one, but it could do its job. For example, if you do have a very heavy camera like a DSLR, and it's really heavy with the lens, so this could be fine. If you have more budget, for example, you can go for a decent tripod, something like that, for example. That's a really heavy tripod made for video cameras, actually, with a fluid head and the base plate, a decent one. You can fix your camera on, and the fluid head is normally made for videographers, like me, to really pan and tilt very smoothly. For the time-lapse, we don't do that. We just tighten up all the screws, keep it steady, and have everything in place where we want to have it. So besides the tripod, besides the cameras, there's something else we need for doing time-lapse. And as I can't hear you, I'll just tell you, it's an intervalometer. So what the heck is intervalometer? It's a nice part, which is essential. I got one here myself. Looks like this. There's a button, it turns on the light. So now it's on. Wonderful. So an intervalometer basically is nothing else but you connect it to your camera and you set an interval here, and the camera presses, the intervalometer presses the camera shutter button just 100 times every 5 seconds, whatever you tell it to do. So like press the button 1,000 times every minute, every 1 second, and so on. So some cameras, they don't have a built-in intervalometer, like Canon DSLR cameras, they don't. So you need to buy this little gadget. It's very affordable, starts at 100 reals, even less, from different brands. Canon ones are normally the more expensive ones, but they don't have really any special features, so you can go for just any intervalometer you find on the market. $20, $10, whatever you find it, it's very decent. So the GoPros do have the intervalometer built in, and some Nikon cameras do have it as well. And also my beloved Sony cameras, they have actually apps you can download into the camera similar to the iPhone and just start it. But if you are on Canon, for example, which have no intervalometer built in, you will need one of these. So to recap, DSLR, intervalometer, DSLR camera, tripod. And besides that, two more things to think of. For example, when you do a time lapse, you want to capture the sunrise of Doha. Let's say sun goes up every day at the moment. I think, let me check with my iPhone. I think it's something like 5 o'clock in the morning-ish. Sun goes up. Sunrise around, 5:48 tomorrow morning, for example. So we do know that the sun doesn't go up like in a minute. So when it's 5:48, you might want to set up your camera at 5 o'clock already, and then you stay till maybe 7 for 2 hours. So you capture the full darkness turning into the light, turning into the golden hour when the sun comes up, and then going further. So you have to calculate around 2 hours of real time you spend there. And now comes the point where you start to do a little math. 2 hours real time. How many seconds of actual footage do I get out of the 2 hours, and how does this work together? Before we come to that, and we come to that in a minute, what I wanted to mention is there's one more thing we need. We do need batteries. We do need batteries for our cameras. We do need batteries for the GoPros, and we do need batteries for the Tita and our smartphones, of course. We do know that battery is an issue, especially with smartphones. With DSLR cameras, it's fine, it's okay. We just buy a couple of them. When the camera is set up for sunrise, for example, at let's say 30 seconds, we take a picture every 30 seconds. Sun's not really moving fast, it's very slow, so it's fine to take like 2 pictures per minute. And then when we play back the video at 25 frames, that means like we can do the math. If we take 2 pictures per minute, we take 20 pictures per 10 minutes. We take like 25 images or pictures every 12.5 minutes. That means like 12.5 minutes in real time is 1 second of our video. This is what it ends up at the end of the day. But what I want to tell you, one more thing about the batteries. 30 seconds interval allows you actually to change the battery in between the shooting, which is pretty cool. iPhone, you need to get it charged. You can buy one of them external battery packs, which just mount your iPhone, fully charge it, and you mount this into your iPhone. Actually, charge helps a lot. Helps a lot. And of course, when you're shooting time is out there and it starts maybe raining or gets dusty, you want to cover your camera. You want to like put some foil over it or cover it up with an umbrella, maybe not even here. Sometimes it's raining as well. Certain things to there. A little presentation here. Actually, it's only one slide, so it's a little one. And this is an actual image I time-lapsed in one of the Palm Towers here in Doha a couple of weeks ago. And I was up there at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I wanted to capture the sunrise of this location. So it's one of the balconies of the Palm Towers, so it was not through a window, it was really outside on the balcony. And there's the first approach when you do a time-lapse is find the location you want to time-lapse. So in this case, it's a beautiful view over Doha West Bay area, Daphna area, Al Daphna. And it's a lot of lights in there from the buildings, a lot of lights from the skyscrapers, and we do see the different yellowish and red and blue and green and all these tones are in there. And then you need to do some calculations. And I have listed this here for you. So before we start doing the time-lapse setup, we have to think of, okay, as I mentioned before, 5 a.m. till 7 a.m., 2 hours, I'm safe, I'll capture the sunrise. So my shooting time will be 2 hours. And then I do know, because I learned that in college, 1 hour has 3,600 seconds. So 2 hours is 7,200 seconds, which we do calculate in seconds, which makes the whole thing easier. So my actual shooting time is 2 hours, equal to 7,200 seconds. The image interval, and now comes the point. When I capture objects, so sunrise here, the sun doesn't move that fast, as mentioned, so every 30 seconds, one image, totally fine. If I imagine of what else, if I go out there and shoot time-lapse, what else is of interest? Maybe clouds. Clouds are really moving slow, and when you time-lapse them, then speed it up at 25 frames per second. So the whole real-life cloud slow movement will go really fast, nice clouds. And out of my experience, if you do time-lapse clouds, for example, you should set the interval really, really quicker, smaller, like every 3 seconds to 5 seconds. If you shoot clouds and you have your interval at 30 seconds, the clouds get very bumpy in the final, like cloud, cloud, cloud. It's not a fluent movement of the clouds, it's really like bumpy movement. So the smaller the interval, the more fluent the final video will be. The only thing, and now comes to one more point, is memory cards. If we shoot on a DSLR camera and we have a memory card, make sure you have 64 gig, 128 gig. When you let this camera run for 2 hours and more, and you shoot an image every like 5 seconds, you're gonna need a lot of SD cards, and they're gonna be full immediately. So better shoot RAW to have more opportunities in post-production, or you actually say, okay, no, I'm good with JPEG. It's a more compressed format, but still does totally the job. You just have less options in image contrast, brightness settings, and etc. But for video only, shall be fine. It's up to your experience. It's up to what you want to go for. Memory cards, good point. So back to our scene here. The image interval for my sunset was set to 30 seconds. Okay. So if I'm doing the math now again, and I say, okay, I have camera running 2 hours, like 7,200 seconds. And I take an image every 30 seconds, so 7,200 divided by 30 results in 240 images only. So at the end of the day, I have 240 images taken in this 2 hours time sequence. We do this like here now, it's 240 images by 30 seconds. Then it should have ended up in 7,200 seconds. I hope that's right. Yeah, 0, 0, 3, 4, 12, one more, 6, 1, 7. Perfect. So, and what does this mean for us? At the end of the day, I have 240 images after my 2 hours of time lapse. And if I play this back at a video speed frame rate at 24 frames per second, which is the international playback rate for cinema, and you need 24 frames per second minimal, that your eyes and your brain do convert the still images into actual motion. So if you watch a video with 24 frames per second, it gives you the impression, although it's only still images, but it's moving in motion. Your brain and your eyes say, oh, it's a movement, it's fine. If you play it less than 24 frames per second, your eyes and your brain recognize it and it feels bumpy or more non-fluent. So for our high standard HD videos, which we do nowadays, a minimum frame rate of 24 is considerable, and it's the international video frame rate. There is 25 frames per second, of course, which is the PAL TV rate in Europe and also here in Qatar. And there's 30 frames per second, which is the NTSC system, which is mostly used in the United States. maybe Australia, I don't know, but definitely not here. And now comes the big aha, the big surprise. At the end of the day, I went up on this tower half an hour before, and I set up my equipment, everything's fine. I let the camera run for 2 full hours. And then after these 2 hours, I got 240 images out of it. And when I played back again now at 24 frames per second, then my final video sequence, it's 10 seconds only. So all this effort, half an hour at home, downloading the images, going into the computer, editing it, doing whatever I do, full day of work for 10 seconds of video. Welcome to the world of time-lapse. So yeah, this is the thing. It's a lot of effort, but at the end of the day, the outcome can be very, very nice. And I'll show you that video. It's a short sequence just of the sunrise. I have it here, and later then we'll talk about the camera settings, and we'll talk about how we download the images, how do we arrange the still images, and how do we finally get a video out of it. But now I'll show you that. So, hello Yusuf. I'm seeing you writing something here. So, that's how to do movie or what? Yes, we'll do a movie out of that. And I did that already, so I'll show you that now. I have it here in my presentations, and it's no, I'll show you that while we do it. I'll show you something else before. I'll show you a short video sequence I shot in Vienna. And actually the funny part here was I was also, but I was out there for 24 hours, and I shot a time-lapse sequence over the period of 24 hours, and then took all the still images. It was over 6,500 images, and made a final movie out of it. I stitched it together. So let's watch this first, and after that I'll show you how we do the video with the Doha footage, and I'll do it here live in front of you. Have fun with this one, guys. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that little video, and as you could see, it was shot on a Canon 60D. So it's a consumer camera, it's just a normal camera, nothing special. And the good thing about this video to show is we had a lot of clouds. And it's hard to find clouds here in Qatar, but sometimes we do have clouds. Now it's the season where the clouds are going to start. So the webinar today is actually placed in a very good time, because from end November, December, and January on, so the coldest month is January, February here in Qatar, and you have a lot of clouds out there. So you can practice until then, and then you can go out and shoot some clouds. And remember, when clouds are moving, to set the interval at like 5 seconds to make it not that bumpy. So how do we do that? How we do actually achieve this whole thing? We heard a lot about the different cameras. I will go into a little bit into making time-lapse, professional time-lapse on consumer cameras like the DSLR cameras. And at the beginning, what's very, very important, and you can take a note of that, is that you always keep the camera in manual focus mode. There's autofocus and manual focus. But the most important thing when you shoot time-lapse, keep it on manual mode. There's a big, big reason why. Because you set up the focus for your scene and you don't want the camera for every picture that it looks for a focus point. Because when you have moving objects, even if it's slow moving objects like clouds, like ships, maybe even cars in a traffic jam with much lights at night, wonderful images, you need to make sure that your camera is on manual focus, because else it can happen that the focus shifts to the back and to the front, and then you have like this jiggling in your images. So always put the camera on manual focus mode. The second way how we shoot time-lapse is camera is manual mode, and there's aperture priority mode, and there's shutter priority. We don't want to use the auto mode at all. That's not really cool for time-lapse. What you can do is either use manual mode or aperture priority. That's the two modes here on your camera. One time it says M, and one time it says AV. You can see that here, M or AV. This is the two modes actually what you should really use when you shoot time-lapse on. If you're really good and experienced, you can shoot in manual mode. But the thing is, if you do have a certain light change out there, if you shoot during the day and it's only day, it's fine. You go to manual mode, you set up your camera. If you're shooting only at night and it's fine, you're totally good with manual mode. But if you shoot day to night scenes or night to day scenes, you need to adjust the shutter speed and everything in your image. You do it manually because you're experienced and know how to do that. Or there's certain external devices that can do that for you. This is some more effort and more experience and so on. So as for now, what I would suggest you to do is put the camera on aperture priority. And many photographers out there of you guys might know when you do landscape photography, the aperture setting, you don't want to have a shallow depth of field because you want to have like really everything in focus to get a nice and clear, brilliant image. So you set your aperture around 10, 11 maybe, f9 would also do it. So keep it a large depth of field. Set focus. My framing, you actually see here now. So this was my framing. I was shooting this on a 16mm lens. So I wasn't able to get like everything in frame. So the towers on the left are a little bit cropped and the one on the right. But I was able to get a really nice shot of what I was looking for. So this is shot at f9, I suppose. And you can even see the towers in the foreground are in focus, and even the ones in the back. And even if you look behind the towers in the back, you could see the pearl there. Some there's the water in between the ocean, and then you see some towers of the pearl. So it's all there. It's fine. So this is for the camera settings. So what you do is you take a tripod, you mount your camera, look for the perfect framing. So boom, this is my framing now, and then you tighten up all the screws. You turn on your camera, you make sure the battery is fully charged, you make sure your SD card, or CF card, whatever you use, is clean, formatted, and you have plenty of space. And then you do the math, as we explained before. 2 hours shooting, 30 seconds image, 200 images at the end of the day, played back at 24 frames, 10-second sequence. Full day of work for 10 seconds, but it's worth it. For the camera again, manual focus. Never use autofocus. Use aperture. What does this actually mean is that you choose the aperture f9, f10, so that everything is in focus. You set the focus point to the foreground to the background, wherever you feel comfortable with it. And then the camera adjusts automatically the shutter speed of your image. And you start in the middle of the night, the image is darker, so the shutter speed will be longer, it will be a longer exposure. You have like a shutter speed of maybe 1 second. And when you have a shutter speed of 1 second and the camera is on a tripod, it will be giving you a clear and nice proper image. The brighter it goes, the sun goes up, the brighter it goes, the shutter speed will go faster. It will go down to 100 of a second, 1000 of a second, even if it's really bright out there. So on aperture priority mode, the camera does this for you. So if you do a day into night transition or night into day transition, and you don't have any extra special devices which are very cost intensive, let's say it that way, starting at $1,000 and more, which do that automatically for you, you're totally good with aperture priority settings. And that's for the settings for now. So you do the math, you got the settings, you got the tripod, you got your camera set up. You put the intervalometer in your camera and tell the intervalometer, okay, let's take every 5 seconds, push the shutter button for the next 2 hours. You can all do that, define it with different devices. Some cameras, as mentioned, do have a built-in intervalometer, like Nikon cameras, like the GoPros, like the iPhone, etc. Just make sure it's fully charged, get some battery in there. Same for the Canons, of course. And then what you do is, you take something like that, a nice chair, whatever chair you have with you, you sit down, you relax, and you wait for 2 hours. Of course, before you start, you take some test shots, you take some photos, you look into it, say, this framing is nice. Yeah, the shot looks good, I like it. You take 3, 4, 5 test photos, and then you let the camera go. You let it just start, let it run, and watch it, control it, look that the battery is fine, look that nobody bumps into it. So if you're on a balcony and you're the only guy on the balcony, you take care of the camera. Because the worst thing that can happen is when you are on the balcony next to the camera, make sure you go a little away from it, because somebody calls you, you're playing around with your phone, and you hit by accident, you just hit the tripod, one of the legs of the tripod. And this is experience, I mean, this just happens. And now the whole camera shifts. Oops, I got a different framing. Oops, how am I gonna deal with that? Problem, make sure nobody bumps into your camera, not even yourself. It does happen. Worst thing, you have to do it again. Come the next morning, 4 a.m. on full time. Yeah, this is the little thing. I want to show you now how this can look if you are finished with that. So now it's so here it is. It's called Westpay, and now I'll show you from the program. I'll share my screen now with you. Let me share my screen with you guys. I'll click on the desktop. I think that should do it now. And you let me know if you can see my screen. Full screen, screen 1. So it says I'm sharing my screen. Hello. Okay. I think everybody can see the screen now. Okay, that's good. Little final video, and I'll show it to you now from the balcony thing, and then I'll go step by step through it, and you'll see how it works. So have a watch, short one. So you see that fluent and you could hear the music. So this is the lovely one. And let's go through the process of creating a video like that, right? So if you could give me quick feedback, was it shown fluently and you could hear the music properly? Just for me as in back feedback. Type in, yes, was fine. No. Oh yes. D is typing. Amazing. Yes. Better than the first video. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, no. So how do we do something like that? And now comes the big surprise, guys. We're not using editing programs for that. We're not using Premiere Pro. We're not using Final Cut for the first step. What we're using is Lightroom, Photoshop, QuickTime. This is the programs we're using. And here's why. Because we're shooting still images. We're shooting photos. It's not a movie yet. It's still images. And we got to download the still images from our camera. And we do that directly on our desktop. And then what we do is, I'm going to show you today in Photoshop, which most of you people have heard of, and some of you have used already. But it's really a simple process in Photoshop. So the first thing, when I download all the images from my camera to my computer, and I'll open this here now, and you can see that on the shared desktop. I have a folder which includes all my images. Okay, so you can see all the images. And if I open the first one for you, you actually can see it's the timestamp at April 21 a.m. So it was close to 5 a.m. in the morning. So if I open that image for you, you can see it's really dark. So you have a really dark sky in the background, much light. So this was 4:45, 54 a.m. If I pick an image now at 5:33 a.m., you'll see it's getting a little brighter, not that much necessarily at the moment, but just a little bit. So if I go forward to, let's say, 5:55 a.m., so 1 hour ahead of when I started, like 5:54 exactly, this is already what my image looks like. It's much more brighter, less light, so you see the change. We don't actually capture the sunrise in the sense of we're seeing the sun here, because the sun goes in the east, goes up in the east here, which is out of frame. But I wanted to see the West Bay area changing the lights when the sun goes up, like turning off lights and getting into the daylight. And now if we move to the last frame, and that was shot, let's move to the one 2 hours after we started at 6:54 a.m. And this is how it looks at 6:54 a.m. in the morning. All the lights are gone and we just have the normal daylight there, okay? So remember, 6:54 a.m. and the beginning was at 4:54 a.m. So we go from dark to the bright one. Okay, there's one more thing. So I have all these images and it must be a sequence number. For example, in my case, it's out of the camera. These images, they are numbered like DSC 00482, 483, 484, 485, and so on and so on. Very important is when you have some images in between, like one image where somebody ran into your camera or somebody was like, there's a camera, what does it do? Oh, it does a time lapse. Click, hey, and you see your head in front of the camera. Not really cool. So you need to get rid of all these extra images. So you just go into your tower thing. I was lucky enough that no Superman, Spider-Man, or Batman came flying into my lens. So I didn't have to delete anything, but just to consider. So you delete this one. And then what you need to make sure is that they are numbered in a ascending way, so that Photoshop, when we import it as an image sequence, which we do as next step, can recognize it as an actual image sequence. And there's certain programs that can do that for you. And one of them is a little tool called File Sequencer. I have this here, and you can see it on my screen. It's for free. You can find it in the internet. It's called File Sequencer. And what it actually does is you define a source destination. So I select my source destination as my folder with the time-lapse images. And then the next thing is I put an action like rename my files or copy my files. And then I put a destination. So I select a folder where I say, or I create a new folder, like let's say we create a folder called renamed. And as you can see, there's already new files in there, starting with sunrise 000, 001, 002, and so on. So it has an ascending sequence, which is just numbered. It doesn't matter if you start with 100 or 154 and 55, 56. It just needs to be a continuous sequence throughout your images. Very important if you stitch together different time lapses from different locations where the file numbering has changed, so that the Photoshop or the image editing program just recognizes it as one sequence. Long story short, for file sequencer, you'll define your prefix. In my case, it was like sunrise, and then you just say file extension. We don't change that. Use the current extension, and then the number. You can set the numbering here. So you can number actually to start number is 1 or 0 and make it 3 digits, and then you click the button renumber the files. You click that, and what actually happens is this files starting with VSC whatever go into a new folder and start there with change, nothing else changed, just the file name. Once we have done that, we open our Photoshop, and to those of you guys who don't have Photoshop yet, you can download it. It's a 30-day free trial period, and then later with Adobe, I think it's a 35 reals per month subscription. You can just use it as long as you want. So now we come to the point where we want to import our still images and create a first file sequence, video sequence out of it. So I have my Photoshop open, as you can see, and the only thing I go is open, not file new, just file open. And then I go for the folder that I just renamed my files. In my case, I put this time-lapse images, and then I have the folder renamed, and it starts with sunrise 000. And I'll mark only the first image, only the first one. I don't push like Command A or Control A and mark everything. I'll just click the first image. And then Photoshop, if you look down here, it says image sequence, and there's a checkbox. Okay, you see that down here? And I'll check that checkbox, shows that I'm about to import a sequence. So Photoshop looks on the ascending file number. And then I click open. And now there's automatically coming up a new pop-up box, which asks me for my frame rate. And it asks me, so what frame rate do you want? Okay, I'm back, if you lost me. So the frame rate, in my case here, it's 24 frames. Why is that important? There's two things why it's really important. And the first is, if you are producing a time lapse and you have a friend who shoots a video and he shoots it on a TV camera, Sony cameras, and he wants to show it later as an Al Jazeera documentary or put it into film festivals or whatever, you need to make sure your time lapse sequence has the same frame rate as he's shooting his video on. So for example, if he shoots on 20 frames per second, then you shall give him your time lapse sequence with the same settings. Else, it's going to be squeezed, it's going to be speed up, it's going to be not like the original you handed over to him. So if you do your project on your own, it's your decision. If you work for somebody, always ask, what frame rate are you shooting in? What frame rate do you want me to deliver the time-lapse sequence? 24, 25, 30, whatever is fine. So for us, we'll just set it to 24 here and click the OK button. And then Photoshop imports all these images and creates a file sequence video out of it, like automatically, instantly. So what you can see now here, we start with the first image. It's really dark out there, and I have a timeline here on the bottom of my Photoshop. So, and if I pull the level forward, you can see how the image is changing from bright sunlight to like half lit golden hour to like back into complete darkness. Okay, so what I can do is I can set now the amount of images I want to finally export as a video. But basically, this was the simple process of how you import your images in Photoshop and just check box this image sequence check box, like check it, that's it. And then you have your final video here in Photoshop. You can hit the space bar. It's not rendered yet, so it will show, play it very bumpy, but you could always get the idea of what's going on. So if we are happy with our sequence and we want to export this sequence as a video, we're going to do that now. And now then, the next step is to put this video sequence into our actual editing program. And this is my process, how I do it. I don't change the contrast or color or everything in Photoshop. I could do that, but for my purposes, because I work a lot with editing programs and I come from the filmmaking side, so what I do is I export this image sequences into my editing program and apply all the color grading, all the filters in the editing program. Yes, you can do it in Photoshop. That's what Photoshop is for. But for me, it works with the editing program and it's a different workflow. But you can also do it here in Photoshop and then just export it to your editing program or give it to your documentary friend. Both ways work. There's no pros and cons. It's just the way it is. It's just what works best for you. So I want to export this now, and this is very easy. I just click File, Export, and then go to Render Video. So it's menu File, Export, Render Video. And I click on that, and now comes the very, very interesting part. So I can, of course, choose a name. I call it like West Bay. I can select the folder where it's going to be saved. And now comes the really, really tricky part or a nice part. The format I can set it to. So I can set it as QuickTime. I can set it as H.264, which is a compressed video format, or I can choose different formats. I can also set like, shall it be a high quality animation? I can set the document size. And this is something which is really, really important and which gives me the opportunity in post-production to crop in lossless. And I mentioned that in the beginning of today's session. When we shoot HD video, it's actually 2 megapixels. This image was, the camera I used was a Sony camera, the A7S, which is only a 12 megapixel camera, but still 6 times an HD camera with 2 megapixels. So my image resolution is actually, and you can see that here, I don't know how close you can see my screen here, but it's actually 4240 by 2832 pixels. And full HD is 1920 by 1080 pixels. So it's 4 times larger almost, or even 5 times or 6 times than my HD video, which means that at the end of the day, if we say this is my image, my photo, and let's say this small part of it, I'm just using my GoPro here, is my HD frame. So I can use that part, and only what we see here is what the viewers see in the final video. So what I can do is I can pan in this bigger image from one side to the other and add an impression of movement. But it's a still image. It's just such a big resolution that my HD view is able to just look and feel what it likes in here. Okay, so this is the big advantage of using DSLR still photos for actual time-lapse shooting. Because at the end of the day, I got a question once like, Alex, why do we use still images for time-lapse? I can just take my camera, press record, my video camera, press record for 2 hours, and then just speed it up in post-production. Yes, totally right. You can do that. But there's always a but. You're very limited in your HD maximum quality, and it's not as good as you would have the quality with still images in sense of color grading, color correction, contrast, brightness, gamma curves. illumination, histogram, sharpening, whatever, you have extremely good possibilities. And if you remember the first video I showed you today, the Vienna 24, at the beginning of the video, it has impression of it pans to the right side. And the camera, the still camera, was not mounted on a tripod, was not mounted on a slider or moving something. It was fixed on the tripod. It's just done in post. Okay? So we'll do all the settings here, and I'll export this still images in their original size. I'm not gonna render it down to HD and do that maybe later in the editing program, but here out of Photoshop, I want to have the original file. So I do set my settings. I click on the render button and click cancel now for the demonstration because I did it before already. And then you get a final file here, which is my case here. And when I double click it, it's exactly the big image, big video of the sequence I just took right out of Photoshop. And the thing is, if you click on the info button, you'll realize, oops, this file has 7.5 gigabytes. So it's a huge file. It's not easy to handle for the most computers, but we need a resourceful computer, and then everything is fine. So the next step is, actually, every modern computer can handle it. It's just a little waiting time, and that's why I speed it up here, not waiting till it actually renders it out, because that may take like 3, 4, 5 minutes. So what I do is I just shortcut that time. I did it before, and what we do now is we open our editing program, which in my case is Final Cut Pro, what I'm using today, and I open a new project. And what I'm doing next is I have my rendered video here, so you can see it's going from dark to bright, and I just drop that down into my timeline. And then when I got it here into my watch, it's 11 seconds long, and you see now the change from day to night, or night to day in this case. So now what we see when we look really closely, we have a black bar on the right side and a black bar on the left side. So why is that? And I just saw there's a question, and it is from Raja. Can we use iMovie to do the same thing you did on Photoshop? No, this is the thing. The editing programs, they are not really meant to import image sequences. It might be that the latest version of iMovie has an extra feature that allows you doing still image sequences, but in general, you shall use like Photoshop or QuickTime to do that image sequence for you. I need honestly to check with the latest iMovie version because I'm not using iMovie, but I can check and I'll get back on you with that. Okay, but people have Photoshop. There's QuickTime available. There's the old QuickTime 7, by the way, which also can do that. If you're using Windows, there's also some certain players. They can grab image sequences, and there's free software out there. You just have to look up for software out there. You can just go for that. Okay, so back to the black bars. So here we see we have black bars on the right and left side. So the thing is, my HD video is at a ratio of 16:9. Okay, and when I do classic photos, my photos are still in 4:3 format. So in this case, my photos fit into the 16:9 HD video, and they have the black bars on the left and the right side. In order to fix that, we have to fill the image, which means we have to crop a little bit in. There's in Final Cut Pro, there is a little button here, just conform on fill, and boom, we got rid of the wonderful, nice black bars. And also, it downsizes my bigger image to this HD size. if I put the perform rate to none, then you see we're zoomed in already into this image, and I can scale it. I can scale out and I can scale back in. And the thing is, I can scale out to the original file, or I hit again the none button and have my image cropped in lossless, because the photo resolution is much, much higher than my final HD field of view. So I can zoom in this bigger image and get still stop at the point with my zoom where I reach HD quality. So this is the good thing. You can zoom in, and then you can not only zoom in, you can pan around in this image. If you can see that, so I can choose different, you know, like views within this image. I can go more to the right side. We have the tornado tower here, for example, or I go all the way left and look for the buildings here. There's the gate mall down there. So now here we see this is a QT building. So there's a lot of opportunities I have here. And with these opportunities, I can do my zoom, my tilts, my pan in post-production. And also what I can do is I can apply certain filters, cinematic filters, which I personally prefer to do here in my editing program. And I'm not doing it in the Photoshop, because I have my film filters here, my cinematic ones. For example, I'm using my Filmation. It's a nice tool called Film Convert, and I just put my Film converter on it. I choose what camera it was shot on. So in my case, it was the Sony camera. It was the A7S. So I can set all these preferences, put the profile I shot it on, and then the images change, like more cinematic style, more sunrise, more heat style. So you can really choose that. At the end of the day, what you can also do, you can speed it up, you can slow it down in the editing program, you can even reverse it. And this is some nice thing I just did here for you guys, and I showed you that in the beginning. So what I did is I speed up the progress from dark night to the sunrise to brightness, and then I reversed this little part, so we go back from bright daylight to nighttime. But it's just a reversed image, but it gives the impression as it goes from day to night, from night to day, and night to day, again and again and again. But it's just this day to night to day image, and then it's reversed back from day to night, and then from night to day, and then reversed from day to night. And I'm gonna play that one more time for you. I hope you can see that. So what you do with a simple sunrise west bay tower shot. So I hope you liked what you saw today. And to recap, to summarize this whole thing, so make sure you get your tripod, make sure you get a decent camera, make sure your batteries are charged, ready to go. Find a nice framing, set the camera to manual focus mode, put it on manual aperture priority, choose your framing, set your focus, set your interval, consider. If you have clouds in there, you want to have a slower interval during the day, like 3 seconds, 5 seconds. If you have a day to night transition, if you have a sunrise, go like for all 20 or maybe 30 seconds. Play around with it, go out there, try, do something. And as I said before, if you do it and do it every day, you'll get better every day. And what I want to show you now, last thing is what you can also do, and I did that. And let me stop my screen sharing. And I want to show you a little last video. What I did is when I was flying from Doha to Dubai in the plane, and what I did is I had my little GoPro with me, and I mounted my GoPro on the window seat of the plane. and they do say no electronic use of devices, but sometimes you ask kindly, and I was allowed to do it, so I have done it. Very short, and this is for the last 2 minutes. This is the calculations for my Doha to Dubai video. So what I did is actually, I wanted to create a video which, as the title says, from Doha to Dubai in a minute. That means, and if we start here now at the bottom of this little presentation chart here. So my video duration shall be 60 seconds. My playback rate is, for American format, is just 30 frames per second. Okay, I just did it that it's easier with the calculations here. So that means I have a final video of 6 seconds at a playback video speed of 30 frames per second, which means I need to take 1,800 images during my flight from Doha to Dubai. And then I ask myself, how long do I fly from Doha to Dubai? Approximately 1 hour. So that means if you do the math correctly, you fly 3,600 seconds from Doha to Dubai, and you need to take 1,800 images. That means you take a picture every 2 seconds. So what I did is I set my GoPro to time-lapse interval 2 seconds. I mounted it on the windscreen inside the window of the airplane, and bing, there we go. And after that, the outcome. Nice. So guys, cool, we're back. I hope you enjoyed that little video session today, the webinar via Entube Center. I enjoyed it myself. I think it was good. And as Entube told you, the recording of this session today will be available soon on the Entube website. It's entube.qa. And thank you for joining. If you have any questions, I'll stay a little more in the chat if you want. And be happy to answer all the questions. As for now, have a good evening. Ma salama.